Okay, so far we've looked at the capability of summarizing the table. So I have no report filter on here. I have employees categorizing my data. I have order dates um, serializing my data. In other words, each of the grouping of dates are being there. Again, I'm not going to deal with dates. I'm going to put shipping company back down in there, and I can actually see. Now, one of the things I might want to do is rather than show the numbers, I might want to show the relative percentages that make up all of Fuller sales or all of federal shipping sales. I might want to know, what does this number actually represent? And there's two ways that we can do this. We can do this by rows, or we can do this by columns. If I make this number or this number represent the percentage of the row, then what I would be doing is saying how much is 54,000 in terms of percentage against the row's total, which is over here. So give me these three numbers in terms of the relative percentages based on that being the total. If I said do this by column, I'd be comparing these numbers to the column total. And I can make those display fairly simply. The way we can do this, I'm just going to right click down and I'm going to go to the value field setting. Most things on the pivot table are right clickable. They have a context menu and you can adjust them that way. So I'm going to use the value field settings, and there are two basic tabs. I've got summarize values by tab, which allows me to change the sum to a count or an average or a max or a min or a product, etc. So I can change the aggregate statistic that I'm using. And I also have the show values as tab, which allows me to display the percentages. So right now there's no calculation, they're just showing the raw result. But I could say make that a percentage of the column total, or make that a percentage of the row total. So if the question I was trying to answer was what are the relative uses of each of the shipping methods for salespersons, I would make this display percentage of the row total. And if I say OK, now you can see that I have the percentages here instead of the raw numbers. Each one adds up to 100%, and I can see that Devolio had a fairly even split between the three shipping companies, 33%, 28%, and 37% here. I can also notice that I have some people that tend to favor one shipper more than the other. So here I have King, who doesn't tend to use Speedy Express as much. Now, the reason for this might be simply that Speedy Express doesn't ship to where King is actually shipping his stuff. And it could be that because I'm showing worldwide statistics, one of my shippers might not happen to ship to the area that I'm actually displaying. So I've got to be careful about making random guesses based on what I can see here. So a report filter will come into play when you want to actually show just specific data. So let's say we wanted to say this just for Canada. I would take customer country and put it down into the report filter here. And that allows me to pull this box down and say just show Canada. And here we go. Now, you'll notice that a couple of these are zeros. Dodsworth doesn't use Speedy Express or United Packaging for anything that goes to any of these Canadian orders. He uses federal shipping 100% here. And that could simply be because he only sells to clients in the area that's served by federal shipping. I could also make this display a percentage based on the column rather than the rows. So the question I'm asking is, what is the relative use of federal shipping across all of the salespeople? I would make this a column total rather than a row total. Right now I'm showing the relative the salesperson's use of shipping methods. I might say show me the individual shipping methods distribution across the salespeople. So who uses what and how many times does each person use this? So here I'm going to change this. I'm going to go down into a value field setting and make this show values as the percentage of the column total instead. Now, it's important to remember that the 100% value is indicating where the summarization is being relativized. So in other words, I'm doing this relative to the total here rather than across here. Of all the orders, regardless of the shipping methods, Callahan makes up 2.58% of all of the orders. Of the federal shipping, he makes up 0%. None of his orders went through federal shipping. Of all of the federal shipping orders, you can see the majority comes from Leverman here. So be careful that you understand what the statistics are actually trying to show you. In this case, look at the 100%, and that indicates the direction that this Now, if we're not using any kind of construction on here, if I just use show values as no calculation thing, then I have equal meaningfulness on either direction. So when you're starting to do percentage of summarization, you need to know the direction. So hopefully that will make sense in terms of the construction of a table. You'll also notice that these guys have checkboxes on them. The checkboxes allow me to say, yes, I want this to be one of my statistics. For instance, I might have customer ID or order IDs up in here. If I just enable order IDs, it will intelligently decide what to do with them. Since order ID is a numeric field, it suggests that the obvious thing to do would be to add up all of those numbers and use that as one of my value numbers. Now, in this case, it's not the case. It's not what I want to do, because order IDs are actually just the descriptors or the IDs of each of the records. It doesn't make any meaningful sense to add them together. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to take the order ID, the sum of down here, go to the value field settings, and here's the other way to get that. Rather than right-click on the actual statistic, I can come down to the construction boxes here and say, go to the field settings from here and make this a count instead of a sum. So tell me how many orders I have as opposed to how much orders I have. So here I have one order for a total of $715 through federal shipping for Devolio. I have 7 orders for Janet Everling for a total of $9,518.65 that were all sent through federal shipping. Now here's a really cool thing about PivotTable. If the obvious question becomes, show me those 7 orders, then it's a simple matter of just saying, okay, let's basically isolate these records and extract them from the table. And all you have to do with the PivotTable is double-click. Double-click invokes what they call a drill down capability. If I double-click there, I will drill down and extract those 7 orders, the ones for Leverling that were sent through federal shipping. And those same 7 orders, I can see all the order IDs that were made up. I can see where they were sent to, and I can see the total of the freight and the order amounts and everything else that I wanted to do there. So this is a separate data table. It was created from the list table. So it gives you the capability of extracting those particular records out. So pivot tables sometimes show the standouts. They show the ones that you want to look at. Say, okay, there's Leverling, had 7 orders in this area. Everyone else only had 1 or 2 or 3, so let's see what those orders are. You can extract those and see. Similarly, you can scroll across the table and see where the outliers are for somebody else. Now, if I'm looking at something like this is the total sum. So if I say, let's show all of these orders everywhere, I could extract those as well. And you'll notice it's just creating a new sheet every time I do this. It's just pulling those orders directly out. So here are the Leverling orders for everybody, federal shipping, United Packaging, and Speedy Express. Here were the Leverling orders for just the federal shipping ID. And I got those simply because I was only clicking on Janet Leverling's line here in this pivot table. If I wanted all of them, I would click on the grand total. If I wanted every record, which would make no sense whatsoever, I would click on the total sum of the order, all order. So that capability is called drill down, and it gives you the capability of extracting the records from the main table into a new table. Now these are disposable. You can throw them away. They don't affect the main data set in any way. And neither does any manipulation that you make to the pivot table. All we're doing is we're displaying records, and we're doing it outside the main data source. So because of that, if somebody else is messing around with your table while you're pivoting it, then you can come in and refresh it and say, go out and get me a new fresh copy of the data. And there's a whole bunch of tools along the top here that essentially mimic all of the right-clicking that I've been doing. The name of the table, the active field settings, the grouping that I had in here. I could click on in there and I could decide the different grouping levels, the summarize, and show values. So I could very quickly go to an average or min and max or count here rather than a sum. And I can go to one of the sum or show values as capabilities here as well. I've also got this last little thing here, and that is the calculated field. Calculated field allows you to add something to your data that didn't exist, but is based on something that's already there. One of the first rules of database design is that you never store anything that's calculable. For instance, if you have somebody's birth date, you can very quickly calculate their age, and that is something that you'll not want to store because it's going to change every year. So what we do is we store the thing that doesn't change, their birth date, and then more difficult thing to do here as an example, but something that's similar to this is I'm going to simplify my table a little bit. I'm going to take away the order IDs because I don't want to know how many there are. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take away the serialization of the data. So I don't want the shipping. What I want to know is all the orders that were done for a specific employee. And one of the obvious things that you can do here is let's start calculating some commission on this. Let's say the commission is 5%. If the commission was 5%, I'm just going to go ahead and do a really hard and fast rule here. I want to create a commission field based on all of these order amounts. I'm not going to do it on my table because I would have to do it for all 830 rows and then add them up. I'm going to make the pivot table do the work. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to create a calculated field, and I'm going to call this commission. And the commission is going to be based on the calculation, which is simply the order amount multiplied by 0.05. This is ugly and multiplied by 0.05. This is ugly and breaking the rule of never use numbers in formulas and things like that, but I'm allowed. I've been tested out and I have a license for this. So I'm going to say order amount times 0.05, and I'm going to add that. Now I have a commission field in my field list. This didn't exist before. I'm going to say OK. It's automatically selected, and it puts it in the logical place. So now I automatically have the order amount and the commissions down in there. So $1,278.40. I get $63.92 commission. This data doesn't exist in the table, but I can make the pivot table show it to me and display those